Welcome to another episode of the Wild Strength Podcast. Today, my guest is Brett Benton, and his walk up song is Show Been Worse by Tyler Bryant and The Shakedown. I've actually never heard that song before until you sent it to me, and I kind of went through listening to all the different ones that you sent, and I was like, all right, I'm going to add that one to my playlist, and I'm going to add that one to my playlist
Yeah,
because a lot of those I
yeah.
haven't ever heard before. But anyways, like I said, I have Brett here. I met Brett in February at the Western Hunt Expo. I was out there working with Kafaru. He works with Montana Knife Company. We didn't
Mhm.
have any serious conversations there, just kind of like briefly met and then have since kind of kept up on Instagram. He has been chasing bears all spring with his wife, which has been really cool to watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll let you kind of introduce yourself, tell everyone a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll kind of see where the conversation goes.
Sure. Yeah. I am a very avid bear hunter. Chase bears all season, like you mentioned. Partially because, whether it be passing on bears or couldn't, you know, uh, get a shot on or whatever. Partially because I couldn't find them. So, avid bear hunter. Would not consider myself the greatest bear hunter of all time, I guess, but. Other than that, I work for Montana Knife Company. I'm the customer experience manager and the VIP program manager. And I do some other stuff with them as well, man of many hats. But yeah, and then I used to play music for a living. Toured all over the U.S. for 5 years, doing that, and then I also am the vice president of a nonprofit for men's mental health down in Florida. It's called the Campfire Fund for men's mental health. Um, so just always busy.
Yeah, I love that. Definitely a man of many hats. Like I said, I did not know that you toured music. Are you from Montana originally? I don't know if I've ever asked.
No. I was born in southern Alabama, and then I grew up in you know South Alabama, South Central Alabama, like Northwest Florida, the Pensacola area. Pretty much anywhere in like kind of that northern panhandle off the Gulf,
That explains.
so the Gulf of
Yeah, while
America.
we were chatting before, I was like, he definitely has an accent that doesn't sound like it's from Montana, but sometimes you can get those country boy accents anywhere. What took you to Montana?
So my wife and I moved out west. We were in Washington State back in 2017, 16. She's a dietitian, so she wanted to go back to school in Washington. She went moved back to Florida. That's when we had gotten together, and then like right after we got together, she's like, "I'm going back to school. Like, see you maybe." And I was just like, "Okay," you know. And anyway, I ended up moving out there with her, and in 2017, I saw Montana for the first time and fell in love with it. We know these older folks up in the Kootenai country, like up in the Flathead, and started hanging out there. Um, and I mean, immediately was like, dude, I gotta get to Montana, man. This place like kicks ass, you know. But we couldn't afford to live in Montana and Washington while she was in school.
Right.
And so we had, especially once COVID hit and all the housing prices started skyrocketing, we were like, dude, there's no way we're gonna make it over there, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
um, so fast forward to 2023. Uh, in January of 23, I took a contract commercial fishing up off of the Bering Sea, like that the stuff you see on like Deadliest Catch, that kind of stuff. And so I got done with that contract and was like, man, that kind of sucked. And so uh, I didn't know if I wanted to go back. I have went back to playing music, and then decided I didn't want to go back. I was out there for 4 months, and they wanted me back on the boat for like another six. And I was just like, man, I just got married like last year, dude. Like, that's a rough go. And so told him I wasn't coming back, and I had texted Josh, the owner of Montana Knife
Mhm.
Company. I had known him and Brandon for a few
Okay,
years,
nice.
and I texted him and was like, "Hey man, like I want to come get my knife sharpened. I want to come see, the new facility. It was new at the time, anyway, and and just say hello." And he's like, "Yeah, man, come on." And then shortly before I got there, he texted me and was like, "Hey, dude, you want to go on the podcast?" And I was like, "Oh, sure, yeah." And then did the podcast, and then I was driving down the road. I was headed north, up into that Kootenai country where I usually bear hunt, and then 15 minutes later, he called me. He's like, "Dude, do you want to move to Montana and work for us?" I was like, "Sure."
Nice.
So yeah, and so in the early summer of 23, we ended up moving here after all. So
Nice. That's all. I always love like I pride myself in being really good at like networking and just talking to people, and like no one that I've ever had on my podcast is like it's not someone that I've just cold reached out to and been like, "Hey, like I follow
yeah,
you on Instagram. Do you want to come on here?" It's always been someone that like I've met somewhere or I know from somewhere or whatever. And you're probably very similar, it sounds like. Randomly people will be like, "Hey, do you happen to be looking for a job? Like I know one that would like fit your personality," or someone like has a job open, and it's nothing related to my career at all, but they're just like, you have a good personality, like here's an opportunity if you're interested. So it sounds like that's something similar to kind of what
right.
you had happen. Like you kind of just came out and were shooting the shit, and next thing you know, like there was a job offer in your hand.
Yeah, I mean, basically, yeah. I had met Josh and Brandon back in 21. I had a contract playing music for Black Rifle Coffee at like some of the attack events,
Hmm.
and so I met them there and kept in touch with them for various reasons. Like I had this outdoor media company that I was a co-owner of. I'm no longer, but so they'd send us knives and stuff like that, and I'd see them around, at the other tacks, and so I had known them, but I had never really like sat down to have a conversation with Josh like quite like that,
Hmm.
you know. Um, and my buddy Ryan, he watched the podcast and he texted me and he's like, dude, he was like, you realize that like the whole second half of that podcast was like a job interview, right? And I was like, I don't know, man. And I went back and watched it and I was like, oh damn. I was like, Josh was kind of grilling me, dude. Like, like it's he every single thing he would say would be like another question, and you kind of see him sitting there like. And when he called me, he's like, "Man, you really had my wheels turning during that thing, man." He was like, "Do you want to come work for us? We have this position we've been thinking about." And I was like, "Dude, yeah,
Heck yeah,
you know,
that's awesome. So did you
yeah."
start, you're from Alabama originally, did you grow up
hmm
hunting and stuff there, or was that not until you came out west?
A little bit, down there, you're whitetail hunting out of tree stands, and the further south you get towards the coast, like the deer get smaller, and so we were hunting like really, like we were hunting like Labrador retrievers down there.
Yeah.
Um, but I didn't do a ton of it. I would go with my uncle a little bit, and then hog hunting, like squirrel hunting, stuff like that. I never really did turkey hunt or duck hunt down there. Still don't really do much of either of those things, and it really wasn't until I was older, probably like my late teens, that I kind of really started diving pretty hard into it. And then by my 20s, I was like, I hate this expression, but I was like sick for it,
Yeah.
and so um, still a much different world than hunting out west. And so once I got out here, it was definitely a way different learning curve out here. I mean, like, you're not hunting tree stands or even flat land
Hmm.
for that matter. So it was definitely, I would say more so than anything, I'm an adult onset hunter.
Yeah, yeah, I
So
am too. And a curious question for you, because I kind of get a lot of people. I'm from Texas originally, and I get a lot of
yeah,
people who will reach out to me and say, "Hey, like I'm preparing for like my first Western hunt, or I'm going out for like elk hunting or mule deer hunting or whatever. Like, what's one thing, if you have any piece of advice, what would you give?" So my question for you, being someone who is who considers yourself maybe like an adult onset hunter, especially hunting out west, like what's one thing that you
yeah.
would tell anyone who's coming out west and they're kind of experiencing a hunt there for the first time?
Oh shit, dude. That's
It's a loaded question.
oh man, that's a loaded question for sure. Um, if they are if they are not from the West, I could not recommend more being in shape the best you can be. And um, living out here, like I acclimated to it, and I was a pretty active dude down there when I lived down there anyway. So it wasn't as bad of a transition period there from being at sea level my whole life to hunting at 5,000 6,000 feet. But being in shape, man. Even now that I have lived out west for almost a decade, I still find that if I'm not keeping up on my general physical health like I should be, like, my wife and I, we're in the gym pretty much all the time except for hunting season or I'm traveling all the time or whatever, so it makes it a little difficult. But um, come hunting season, like I still find there's still even a little bit of a period of struggle, and that's coming from someone who lives out here, right? And so I would recommend being in shape, man. Honestly, like if I could recommend one thing, um, it's and even the difference between hunting here in Montana and then hunting in Wyoming. Where here I'm anywhere between 4 to 6,000 feet, and there I'm at 6,000 to 9,000 feet hunting. I mean, even then it's a huge difference, and there's definitely some struggle there.
Yeah, no,
So
I couldn't agree more. I have a couple friends in Montana, and I didn't realize how. And being in Colorado, like I hunt some stuff. Like I drew a tag this year, and I was looking on Onyx, and there's a chance that I could easily be in like 10,000 to 11,000 feet of elevation, and I'm
yeah,
like,
wow,
I I want to cry thinking about it. But like you said, like your fitness, your like physical abilities is what's gonna make or break your hunts out here. And I would even say, knowing that I know a lot of Montana is at like a little bit of lower elevations, like maybe start places like
yeah,
that, start in lower elevations. Like they don't
yeah,
recommend coming to Colorado and doing a high country mule deer hunt for your first hunt
no,
out west, because that's just gonna be so tough. And even living here, like that's still tough. Like going and hiking that
yeah,
high in elevation. And granted, here there's a lot of access up that high too. So it's not like you have to park down at like 6,000 feet and then hike up to 11,000. Like there's a lot of parking to get access that high too, but it's still
sure.
being up, even just being up there and like hiking around up there is tremendously different than walking around at sea level for sure.
It is. And the other thing that I would recommend with that, with the air density difference
Mhm.
too, is if you were rifle hunting, make sure you were dialed for that elevation difference. Because literally last month that just cost me a bear in Wyoming.
No way.
So it did. Yeah, he was a stud, and so definitely, I guess as an overall general picture, like definitely just be prepared for the landscape of which you were going to be throwing yourself into.
Yeah, no,
You
I
know?
agree 100%. So when you and your wife went to Washington, were you hunting in Washington at all?
Yeah,
Okay. And
yeah.
what was kind of like your first like Western experience hunting? Was it bears?
I would say no. Well, gosh, it all runs together. I shot my. It would be black-tailed deer.
Okay. Yeah.
Like those blacktails that are in the Cascades are different than the Sitka blacktail from Alaska. Like these black-tailed deer are the cousin of mule deer, so they're bigger body than your Alaskan blacktail. A lot of times, they have non-typical antlers. And historically, a lot of them are a lot more narrow antlered, but they have a lot of mass. Typically dark antlered, and they live in like this crazy dark rainforest, like thick ferns and like these giant trees. It's a hunt that is truly unlike any other.
Mhm.
Um, so I shot my first blacktail in 2018. It was the first year that I hunted out there. I didn't hunt for the first 2 years that I was
Okay.
there. Um, and then 2019 got another blacktail, I believe. And so it wasn't until 2020 that I got my first bear. Um, I had hunted them in 2019 and did not have a single clue what I was doing. I thought I did, and honestly, I still feel the same way some days today. So, for what that's worth, but
Yeah, no, that's funny. So I don't know if I had shared this with you when we had been chatting on Instagram, but my I feel like I have not harvested a bear yet. I have hunted them for the past 2 years in Colorado, but you can only hunt them in the fall. And I feel
yeah,
like it's going to be one of those things, like once I finally get one, like I am going to be like sick for it and I'm going to want to keep going. But right now, my only
yeah,
motivation is I just want to fricking get one because I haven't yet. Because I've
yeah,
hunted them the
yeah. I
last
mean,
two.
that's a good
Yeah,
motivation.
like I've hunted them the last 2 seasons and I haven't been successful. And I'm like, I just want to get one, and either I'm gonna never gonna want to get one again, or I'm gonna be totally addicted, and there's gonna be no in
Yeah,
between. But so I came out to Colorado from Texas. I was very unfamiliar with like the draw system, the point system. Like in Texas, you just go to Walmart and you get
yeah,
6 deer tags, and you're on your way. And that is, I
yeah,
found out not how that works here in Colorado or anywhere out west for
yeah,
that matter. So I got to looking, and I had moved here just in time. Colorado has a secondary draw. So I missed the primary draw. I was going to be able to put in for the secondary. I had 0 points for anything. I had never put in for points for anything in my life at this point.
yeah,
Um, and I just in my mind assumed that a bear hunt was going to be I didn't really know anyone at the time who could go hunting with me, so my plan was I was going to be hunting solo. And I'm like, a bear hunt solo sounds like an easy hunt. Ignorant me, like knowing absolutely nothing about bear hunting, I was like, okay, like that's going to be my
yeah,
greatest chance of success. And also, like, depending on the size of a bear, if I have to pack out on my own, like I've heard Colorado bears don't get that big. Like there's some that can get decently large, but for the most part, they're pretty small to medium
yeah,
size. And so um, yeah, in my mind, I was like, I can pack it out on my own. It's going to be an easy hunt. Like I'm putting in for this bear tag, and I drew the bear tag that I put in for. It like didn't really need that many
yeah.
points,
Nice.
and so I hunted them that first season, and it was not an easy hunt at all. Not in the fall because they're in thick
No.
timber and you can't glass them up. Like you just have to hope and pray that you run
Yeah,
into one or that you're sitting water at the right time and you're at the water spot that they
yeah,
come to that morning or that evening. And so yeah, I've hunted them for the last 2 years, but I say that to say, I think it's funny that you kind of had a similar situation where you're like, yeah, I hunted them and I wasn't really that successful, and then now you're just addicted to them.
oh yeah, man. Like I am obsessed. I mean, literally, and it's funny because I mean, there's folks that that hunt bears, and maybe even they get bears, right? But then I was talking to Brian Call one time, and he was like, he was like, the thing about bear hunters, like truly like bona fide bear hunters, he was like, it's like a sickness, like a bug that they can't get rid
Yeah.
of, and I was just like, man, like I've never heard anything more true, and anybody that I know, like Brian, and Ryan Lampers, and like Joe Candelas from the American Bear Foundation, Colby Moorhead from Bear Hunting Mag, and even like just friends of mine, like my buddy Duncan or Mason, um, all obsessed with it. I mean, like throughout the year, like it doesn't even have to be bear season, dude. Like watching bear hunting videos on YouTube, like I'll be talking to Joe from the ABF about something, and like it'll be a totally different conversation, and he'll we'll just start talking about bears. Like, oh well, what you think that they come out in the timber because of they need sunlight at the end? I mean, just like wild shit that nobody else probably even thinks about, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing though is that anybody I know that's obsessed with bear hunting also like mule deer is like their other thing, and including for me, I've only shot one, and I shot that one, and I was like, I could never hunt a whitetail for the rest of my life, like I'm like, dude, mule, it's such a weird thing, but yeah, man, like it just when I got my first one, um, I'd always been like fascinated by bears for whatever reason. Like we have them down in Florida. Florida's actually about to have another bear season for the first time in 15 years.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and so we had them down there. You don't see them very much. Um, I mean, they're all up the East Coast. Like North Carolina, coastal North Carolina has the biggest skull size for black bears in the whole lower 48. So this bear hunting culture all over.
Mhm.
But I didn't really get into it till I was out here. In 2020, I shot my first one, and I called them in, and the only other animal I have ever predator called in was a coyote the night before. And so I was like, oh man, if I can call it a coyote, I can call it a bear. And so I get out to this area where I almost hit a bear with my truck the year before.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, I hear that they stick around the same areas year after year, so I'll just go here, right? And it's August the 2nd. And I get there and I crawl through this creek bottom, like literally like bear tunnels. Like a lot of times there's like really thick creek brush, and over time, like bears and some other critters, maybe like they'll kind of, as they use these trails through the brush, like the brush kind of just like grows around, and it creates kind of like these trail like tunnels
Mhm.
through the creek bottoms. So I crawl through this creek bottom, and I get up to the other side, and I'm sitting there predator calling, man, and I'm like, dude, I ain't no bear hunter. Like I'd call it a coyote. Like there's nothing gonna happen, dude. Like there's no way I could be that lucky, right? And man, about 15 minutes later, dude, I mean, like a Volkswagen Beetle of a bear just like is running across the bottom, and I'm like doing some stupid shit, like I'm on my phone, like not thinking anything's gonna happen, and I happen to look up, dude, and see him, and dude, I was in shambles after that. I'm just like, oh, I don't know what to do, and so I tried to call him up, couldn't get him up to the face so where I could get a clear shot on him, and I could hear him like. If you predator call them, sometimes, especially the big bears, they'll come in aggressive because they're hungry, and so they're like wanting to kill whatever is making that noise, right? And so they're like clacking their jaws and like they're huffing, and they'll kind of like tear at the brush and stuff like that. And I could see him doing that, but I can't see him.
Mhm.
And then 8 o'clock comes around, and I'm like, dude, I gotta crawl back through these tunnels to get out of here. He's here. He's back in his bedroom now, and I'm like, oh shit, man. I'm like, well, better do it before it's black outside. And so I get down to the bottom, and I kind of slip into the brush. And I mean, the brush is like taller than me. And I slip into the brush, and I'm kind of going down this trail, and I hit this meadow, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, this ain't the way that I came in. So I turn around and I get back to like there's like a trail that runs along the creek bush. Like if the mountain is here, there's like a trail here, and then the wall of brush starts like right beside it, right? And so I come out to the trail, and before I even step out of the trees, I see this giant black mass just like barreling down the trail, dude. I mean, and he's from me to like, maybe like the very far end of my bedroom wall over there. And I just was just like, oh shit. And I just like lifted my rifle up and I just shot. Like couldn't even zoom
Yeah.
out on my scope or nothing.
Yeah.
and he went down, and I kind of like try to get some footing and some space away from him, so I kind of start backing up like up the hill, and I'm like cursing and like just like all kinds of words. I won't repeat them here. And then I shoot him again, and he's dead. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, dude, what just happened? And so I walk up to him, and I'm like, man, I mean, he looks like a big bear. I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm like, he looks big, I guess. Like, I didn't know what to
Yeah.
expect. And I took him to the taxidermist, and he ended up being 6.5 feet long, and he was Boone and Crockett's skull. And,
No
like,
way.
yeah, I wrote an article in Bear Hunting Magazine about it, dude. And, like, after that, I was hooked,
No.
you
You're the
know?
second person that do you know Dylan Dietz? Okay.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
said
yeah.
the same thing. He said his first bear he ever shot was like the biggest bear ever, the biggest bear he's ever shot. And he was like, since then I'm like
Yeah,
hooked on chasing bears, but I've not shot one that was that big since then.
yeah. They're hard to come by, man. And I mean, and this is not me bragging, but the next year I shot one equally as big that I also called in. He wasn't as big on the
Okay.
skull, but that's the thing about bears, man. Like they vary so much by genetics, and that's whether it be by
Yeah.
area, by feed, by elevation. Um, I mean, there's bears in Florida and there's bears in Manitoba, right? I mean, and so they have such a versatile range of terrain that they can live in and habitat that they can live in. That first bear, I shot him. This for anybody who's from Washington listening, this is probably gonna put him pretty close to where I shot it, but he was pretty close to an elk feed. We have these elk feeding stations in
Okay.
Washington. So and he had a boot. He was 20 and 3/16 on the skull, but his teeth were like and he was 11 years old,
Wow.
and um, his teeth were damn near in perfect shape. I mean, I've shot 5-year-old bears that had teeth like just as good as this 11-year-old bear, right?
Wow.
And that is in one area of Washington, but then further north, where I hunted a lot of bears over there, my second bear was also about 6.5 feet. He was 18 and 3/4 on the skull, and his teeth were all mangled. I mean, cavities everywhere. They're yellow, like they're falling apart,
Hmm.
and this was like way deep in some drainage. I mean, so he wasn't like a trash bear
Right.
or anything like that. And that's for me, like, that's what drives me. Like, I want to shoot bears in the grizzly country in Wyoming. I want to shoot them in the swamps of Florida. Like, I want to shoot them on the coast of North Carolina. And despite how much I would have hoped I shot one this season in Montana, I want to hunt them in the mountains of Montana. So they're a pretty fascinating critter, man.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's so funny because when I was asking people, like when I first drew that bear tag and I was asking around, I've not found, well, now since then I have, but like early on when I first moved out here, I hadn't met really anyone who had ever like hunted bears. So a lot of people would say, a good
Yeah.
friend of mine calls bear tags in Colorado his bear insurance. And what he means by that is you can get the add on tag with a lot of units with your elk tag that you get. But you
Yeah.
have to get the elk tag in order to get the add-on bear tag. And he says
Yeah.
every year when I do the add-on bear tag, he's like I never see a bear. And he's kind of afraid of bears too. So he's like I never see bears, so I always get the add-on tag so that I don't see them. But he's like the 1 or 2 years that I didn't get it, I saw bears and I was freaked out. So he's like I call it my bear insurance. Like if I have the tag, I'm never going to see a bear. But if I don't have the tag, I'm bound to see bears. And I've heard that so commonly here. And like I said,
Yeah.
especially you can only hunt them in the fall. You can't spring bear hunt here. And at that time of year, they're always in thick timber, like they're where the elk are usually. So it's a little bit
Yeah.
harder to hunt, but I guess I didn't realize, and maybe you can expand a little bit more. Like you said, they're in Florida, they're in Manitoba, they're here, they're in Montana, and like how each of them are so different. Because I think that was another common response I was getting, as everyone was like, "I don't know how to hunt bears because they're so different."
Yeah, yeah, they are, man. So you could approach that any number of ways. So we'll start with region. So in the southeast, um, for every like food plot that somebody's hunting deer off of, depending on the area, there's a chance that you could have a bear coming in and like hitting your corn too, or whatever. Like, I mean, they're 100% a food driven animal. I mean, all animals are in a way, right? But bears are so much more. Um, you go up north, and like Pennsylvania and Maine, some of those states, like, you're hunting them out of different kinds of oats,
Yeah.
things like that. Um, And then out west, and a lot of the eastern states, like they don't have a spring and fall season. Usually it's just one or the other. So you start getting out west, spring bear is more popular. It's a great way for folks to get out after like the winter, like winter's cold and bitter, and like you haven't been doing shit for 5 months, right? And like you're ready to get back out there. A lot of people like they're hunting turkeys at the same time, or they're shed hunting, or whatever. And so for spring, it's usually more popular, and it doesn't interfere with any fall plans that somebody might have, right? Like their elk hunts or whatever. So um, spring season, early season, grass, um, green grass, like those neon green shoots that follow the snow line. You need like a certain amount of sun, you need a certain amount of snow melt, and you need a certain amount of like moisture for like really good grass in general. And even then, it's very dependent on area. So the reason I say that is because this season, me and my wife, we usually would hunt bears up north during the spring season, like in that Kootenai country, and we decided to stay closer to home, like here in the Missoula area for this season, and I hunted them from April until literally what's today, Wednesday, 3 days ago.
Mhm.
So early on in the season, like there's still a lot of snow, there's still a lot of brown. Most of the bears are not out. Um, you will get big boars coming out of the den first, and they're very localized to where their den is. Like they might come out and like eat a little bit, and then they might go back to their den and sleep for a day, and then come back out. And as time goes on, like they'll kind of, you know, keep going out more and more, and then stay out, and then they're moving more, and then they're really kind of cruising um for those food
Mhm.
sources. If there's no grass, I mean, they'll eat other stuff, like they'll tear up logs and stumps for like the termite grubs and um things like that. And then once you get a little bit of warmth and sunshine, especially on the south facing slopes, like out here we get balsam root, which is it's like a big yellow blossoming flower,
Okay.
that's full of nutrients, and they'll start to eat that stuff. And then late May, still probably cruising for more grass. And like as the snow melts up, the grass will follow suit. And anywhere where there's moisture, like there's more lush grass. And so like usually what I find is like water is extremely important for hunting bears. Like there has to be water close by. And if it's at 6,000 feet, then there's a spring somewhere.
Mhm.
Like there's not anything that's ever told me that a bear is going to go from 6,000 feet, 3,000 feet down just to get water.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if they eat snow like my dog eats snow, so maybe they do. I don't know, right? But and then as the season goes on, some of that grass starts burning off. They have some options. So like maybe really late May, but usually like the first 2 weeks of June, like the the deer fawns and the elk calves start dropping.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that they ate fawns and calves, and I've never really been quite sure as to whether they like target them or not. But a buddy of mine from Onyx, Jack, we have been talking, and he's like, "Well, I have this elk calving area that I want to go look at, further south of here." And I was like, "Sure, man." I was like, neither of us are having very much luck, and so I started reading about it before we got down there, and I came across this article. I think it was from about 10 years ago. It was Montana Sportsman's Magazine or Montana Hunter Magazine or something like that. Anyway, there's this fella named George Beatus, and he was like one of like the founding members of like the Mule Deer Foundation, like Boone and Crockett, and some other crazy stuff. He has lived a life, and now he writes for a Western Hunter magazine. And so I hit up Pedram at Western Hunter, and I was like, hey, there's this guy, and I want to talk to him, and I'm hoping that you will send me his information on this super random question, out of on this random day. If you could like send me his info, that'd be awesome. And Pedro's such a nice guy, dude. He was like, "Oh, George is one of the nicest people I've ever met." He was like, "Yeah, you two have hit it off." The reason I want to get in touch with him is because that article that I read, George had been hunting spring bear at the time for 40 years, and for about 35 of those years, he had been targeting bears that were focusing in on elk calves and deer fawns,
Mm.
in the high country, and it's something I'd never really even really thought to target. I thought it was kind of a happenstance thing. So in his article and what he explained to me when I went to sit down with him and meet him is these bears, they're following the same grass up that the deer and the elk are,
Mm.
and so by coincidence, in these high grass areas like the deer and the elk are up there for the feed, and the bears are also going up there for the feed. And as they're cruising the grass, they're like, "Oh shit, this is a deer fawn," and they snatch them up. You know what I mean? It's super violent and super ugly to
Yeah.
watch, but so they um, will target stuff like that
Mm.
too later in the
Yeah.
season. They'll go back to stumps. They'll go back to logs and stuff like that. I mean, they're pretty opportunistic. Early on in the season, they might be hitting like a winter kill or something like that. But
Right.
one thing that I just saw 2 weeks ago that I had never seen before was um, me and my wife were watching this sow with these cubs, and I had the spotter on them, and I'm like, man, like, what are they eating? Because it doesn't look like grass. Like I could see the cubs like taking their hands and like pushing like a bush to their face,
Mm.
and I'm like, what could they be eating this time of year? So anyway, she ends up shooting a bear, a different bear. It was a boar, not a sow, with cubs. And so um, when we were over there, I realized that the huckleberries were already have like premature fruit on them,
Oh.
that was blossoming, or maybe it's like I don't know, it looked like premature huckleberries. And so, which leads me to the second part of the question in the fall. Um, it depends on the time of year, right? And so, like I was telling you a few weeks ago, if you can hit it in August, some states like Washington, Idaho, Oregon have a fall bear season that starts in August,
Okay.
and in August, you get ripe choke cherries in the drier climates. So like Eastern Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Eastern Washington, you get choke cherries. They're riparian, like they have to grow near water, so they're close to creek bottoms, which bears love that thick brush. They like to stay cool.
Mm.
They like to stay hidden. Um, so they'll target these choke cherries towards the end of August. The choke cherries are burning out, but the huckleberries are coming in, and the huckleberries also like they'll burn out, just like the grass, like it'll burn out going up the mountain. And so late August, early September, you can hit the huckleberries. Um, Mid September, which is when rifle season starts for bears here in Montana. Um, and I think Wyoming, some places, and then some places in Wyoming starts on September 1st. In Colorado, it's September 1st too,
Yep.
right? Yeah, so later in the season you could try to hit like the really high country huckleberries, but outside of that, man, you're kind of chancing it. I called the biologist and he said that they will target hawthorn berries, which they grow in like thickets. I didn't know what one was. I had to drive all over creation to find a damn hawthorn bush, and I finally found one, and it was already burned out by the time I got to it, right? But and I don't think that's a favorite food of
It's like a
theirs.
last resort kind of thing.
Western Washington, yeah, yeah. Same with like the service berries, I think, and thimbleberries and some other stuff. But and then in Western Washington, like same time, like August, you can hit um any of that coastal climate. Uh, there's Himalayan blackberries. They're an invasive blackberry. And they grow, I mean, you just like fields of thickets, especially around clear cuts and power lines. Like the blackberries are a very aggressive plant, so they'll take over, they'll hammer those, and then in the high country they'll hunt or they'll eat blueberries.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that's interesting. So I've
yeah,
always heard it sounds to me, and maybe like for all hunting, like knowing your foraging skills is important, right? But I think specifically for bears,
yep,
like foraging skills as far as knowing like your berries, your oak brush, all of that. Like if you don't know that, you're gonna
yeah,
probably really struggle to find bears, is what it sounds like.
yeah. You would. I mean, you could always find them by chance. There are people that shoot them off the road or see them off the
Yeah,
road. You know. I never seem to be one of those people who could have such a graciously
because you
easy
know so
hunt. You
much.
know what I mean? But yeah, I know too much. I guess, and so it's like I have to just work my ass off for them. But I'd prefer it that way anyway.
For sure. There's
So
a spot, yeah, so the
yeah,
September or the Colorado rifle season runs all of archery season. So all of September, and then you have like your separate first through fourth rifle seasons that you can also hunt bears in. But I've heard like once September's done with that, like bears are a lost cause in the fall. Here, I'm curious if that's everywhere else
yeah,
too. Um, but where I was this past year, I was like, you know what? I put way less effort into my elk tag because I was like, I'm just gonna hone in on this bear tag. I'm just gonna like get after it. I spent like
yeah,
8 days all by myself, no service, just looking for freaking bears. And I'm like hopping around from spot to spot, and like the first 2 or 3 days of the spot that I was in, like looked like a really good spot. And actually, these ladies happened to come by, and they were on horseback, and just stopped them. And I'm like, hey. I get it if you don't want to talk to me. I'm some random stranger walking around with a bow, but like I just have some questions for you. Like, do you frequent this place? And
yeah,
they're like, yeah, what's up? And I was like, I'm bear hunting. And at the time, I had the rifle tag, but I was hunting it with my bow where I was, because
yeah.
there was no really like long range shots that I was going to be taking at all. Um,
Right.
but it
Yeah.
looked like a good berry area, but kind of like you said, you could kind of tell that like there were berries there at a point in time. I just didn't know how long they had been gone. And so I'm talking to them, and I'm like, I'm just curious, like, have bears been here? And they're like, oh yeah, if you would have been here in August, they were everywhere. Like the berries are gone now. And I was like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me? That's so uncool.
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. That's and it's pretty much like that across the board. I think no matter where you're at, um, I guess the main difference being though is that out west, bears they go into hibernation because of the cold temperatures, and it's not hyper no it's not hibernation. Can't remember what it's called, but it's like hibernation light. And so they're not a true hibernating animal. But then, like in climates like Florida, like I mean, there's no cold weather in Florida. I mean, well, last year there was snow, but it was like 2 weeks, right?
Right.
Like historically, historically in the South, you get like 2 weeks of cold weather and then it's just hot year round,
Hmm.
you know. So those bears are not packing it up for the winter because there's no winter, and but your food sources generally stay the same year round in climates like that too, because like you know, um, like the animals that do hibernate, I think that they do because like their food sources are running out, and so they do that to conserve for the winter. With bears being similar, they say that in Washington, like Western Washington, where you don't really get the same degree of cold snaps, that some of those bears don't go to sleep either. I don't know how true that is, but you have to think if they're not going to sleep and they're just eating year round, that also means that they're continuing to grow year round. And so in a lot of those climates where you don't have you either don't have a long hibernation period or you don't have one at all, like you often can find like bigger bears too.
Okay, that makes sense. Another
So
thing that people had
yeah,
recommended to me, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. You had mentioned kind of earlier in the conversation something about like just trash bears. A lot of people told me to. So the tag
yeah,
that I had the first year was in it was like for four different units, but like Ouray, the town of Ouray happened to be like kind of in the middle of all four of them, and multiple people were telling me to like hang out in the trash cans around Ouray, and then like you're bound to shoot a bear if you hang out around the trash cans, and I was
oh,
like, that feels like cheating to me.
yeah. Yeah, that would be weird for sure. I would probably do it because I want to bear hunt every experience that I can, right? But I would be the psycho that is like going to the neighbor's house, like, hey, can I sit your driveway for a little bit? Like, um, but it's with that said, it's similar to baiting, right? And so similar, but not quite the same because when you're baiting, which I have nothing against baiting. It is baiting is honestly probably the best way. Now if you talk to a houndsman or a houndswoman, like they might disagree, but baiting to me is the best way to know what you're shooting.
Mm,
It gives you time to look at them, gives you time to judge them, gives you time, to see if any cubs come in tow later on. If a sow walks in or whatever. So like, but when you're baiting, I mean, you're feeding them people food. I mean, nobody's going and picking, uh, 50 gallons of huckleberries and pouring it on a bait, and
yeah,
then finding 50 more gallons 2 days later,
yeah,
right? And so it's in a way they're still kind of eating trash. I mean, it's kind of trash for them because people food generally is not like great. It's processed and it has a lot of sugars and stuff like that. So, um, I would not recommend it. Uh, hunting your neighborhood for bears. Like, I'm not saying I wouldn't do it, but I'm saying that I probably wouldn't
yeah,
recommend it.
yeah. No, that's fair. What are
Yeah.
your Oh God, I was about to say a question and then it just escaped my brain. Oh, we were talking about the concept of
Uh,
like, oh, baiting the bears and stuff. Is that like
yeah.
I've heard that bears taste like what they eat usually. And you've even
Yeah.
mentioned that
They
bears
do.
taste better in the fall because they've been eating berries all summer, all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. So, to that point of like baiting or getting a trash bear, a trash panda, like, do you think that that bear would taste a little different based on if it's been eating trash or coming to this bait all the time?
I think it depends. I think it depends on when, right? I mean, if you get a bear and he got into the trash that day, and it was the first time he ever had ventured that far into town, like maybe probably not so bad, right? And even then, like I don't know that a trash bear would taste terrible. I mean, because I guess it depends on the person's trash, right? Like if they're a trapper and they have a bunch of beaver carcasses in their trash can, like sure, it probably would not taste super great. That said, I mean, if you got a family and they got 4 kids and they go through 10 boxes of honey buns a week and the kids only eat half a honey bun and they get bored, you know what I mean, and they throw it away, then it's still going to be a sweet eating bear, I'm sure.
Mhm.
But it does depend on the food that they eat. I mean, you get these you see it with some black bears up in Alaska. They're coastal and they eat seafood.
Mhm.
Um, like they're like truly coastal, like they live on the water, versus like coastal Washington, you don't really see that. Like there's enough food pretty close by, like
Okay.
in the mountains, that they could probably get to. But in Alaska, they're eating shellfish like clams when the tide is low. Um, Salmon, I would assume. You know, but like they say, like grizzly bears up there, like they taste terrible because they taste like fish because like or the brown bears, those big coastal brown bears, so that's all they eat, right? Um, Generally speaking, I think that fall bear tastes better than spring bear because spring bear they're eating grass, they're eating termites,
Yeah,
like
it's whatever they can
um,
buy.
you know, yeah, and so I mean, unless you're baiting, right? But like, and so it's natural. I mean, I don't think that those bears taste bad at all.
Mhm.
But to me, it's hard to beat a bear that has eaten chokecherries or huckleberries or blueberries for 6 to 8 hours a day, like every day for
Yeah.
2 months. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and so like the fat on them. First of all, there's a higher fat content in pallbears, like if they're eating well, but that fat is kind of sweet and it's tinted pink
Mhm.
because of all the berries that they're eating, and it makes the meat a little bit
Mhm.
sweeter as well. It's kind of like a sweet beef,
Mhm.
or like a sweet pork.
Yeah, I've heard.
So
So another question for you. One thing, like when I was telling people, because yeah, I'm an adult onset hunter, so like some of my friends who've known me all my life haven't always known me as a hunter. And so I get some, I get some
right,
like really good questions from them because they're just curious, like why are you doing this? What are you
yeah,
gonna do with it? Like how do you cook things, whatever. And a big question I got when I was saying that I was hunting bears is like, well, what do you do with a bear? Like, I mean, people are confused that people eat bears. I'm like, well, obviously, like I'm
yeah,
hunting for the meat, so you can eat it. And I've had bear before. I just haven't got it myself. But you mentioned like the bear fat as well, and I know a lot of people utilize the bear fat for a
yeah,
number of different things. So what are like you
yeah.
don't have to list all of the things because I'm sure the list is endless, but like a few things that
It
you
is.
use the bear fat for, because I know that's a resource that a lot of people really use too.
Yeah, it is. We use it for mostly cooking, right? And so, searing steaks, right? It has a pretty low smoke point, but it's a very clean fat, and it gets really hot, and so it makes for like a killer oil for searing steaks. If you want a really hot oil, and it's mostly flavorless. Like some people say it's flavorless or odorless. I think ultimately it depends on how long you let that fat render.
Mm-hmm.
I've burned it before, and when it just like butter or just like bacon grease would be a good example, right? Just like bacon grease, when it's melted, it's clear. It's uh viscous. I don't know if that's the right word. I'll
Biscuits,
try to sound
yeah.
smart, but yeah. So it's liquid in form, and then when it's cooled off, or when you put it in the fridge, it hardens and it turns
Mhm.
white. So we have burned bear fat before, and it turned like a grayish white,
Okay.
and it tasted burnt. I mean, it tasted like ash. It was terrible, and I was very sad because I had to throw away a bunch of bear fat. I gave some to my buddy Ryan because he makes beard balm with it.
Okay, cool.
They say that there's the rumor has it like that bear fat is like really good for your hair, and hair growth. Uh, like in the old days, they said it was like a cure for baldness, but my buddy Ryan is still bald, so I don't know, but he does have a giant beard, so
It's
I
working
mean,
some
I don't
places,
really
but
know
not
what
other
to think about that.
places.
Right, yeah. I hope he hears this, but but um but yeah, so we'll use it for searing steaks. We'll use it for dude, if you cook your eggs in it, it will make the fluffiest
Mm.
eggs. you have ever had in your life, dude. It's killer, man.
I've got to do that. I love cooking my eggs
We,
in bacon fat, but and bear fat would be great.
dude, it's so much better in bear fat. A lot of people make pie crusts
Mhm.
with them, which we've done it. It is a pain in the ass, but and when I say we, I mean like I render the bear fat, and then my wife does everything else. So
I
it's
love it.
I ain't making no pie crust, but um cornbread. Um, we have I've made roux with gumbo.
Okay.
I made roux for gumbo with it instead of using like butter or olive oil. Like we'll make like a wild turkey and bear sausage gumbo with a bear fat roux.
Mmm. Sounds
And
great.
um yeah, gosh, my grandmother, rest her soul, I would hope that she'd never hear me say this, but when we made that gumbo for the first time, it was the best gumbo I have ever had in my life. Like it was an old family recipe that I just tweaked and was just like, oh my God, dude. Um, I mean, pretty much anything that you would use oil for, you could use bear fat
Nice.
for, but it doesn't mean I would recommend it for everything, right? And so, um, what's a good example? We made chocolate chip cookies one time with bear
Mm-hmm.
fat, and they weren't bad, but it was not as good as butter. Like I don't know why. Like it was definitely like a more savory flavor,
Yeah.
and
Interesting.
butter has butter tastes like butter, dude. Butter's awesome. Like I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what else to say about it, right? And so, um, but yeah, and then like you can use it. We've made like like a hand salve for it, not quite lotion, but like a hand salve for it, because it's really really good for your skin. Chapstick, dude, bear fat chapstick, like it's really dry here out
Mm-hmm.
west, and like I'm always like licking my lips for some reason, or like maybe I don't drink enough water or something, or I'm out hiking all
Yeah.
day and I'm not drinking enough water and it's dry outside, so like my lips will crack. And like I'm not lying to you, I can have a giant crack in my lip and I can put bare fat chapstick on it and the next day it's gone.
Wow.
Like, yeah, it's you know, my buddy Ryan makes beard balm with it. People, and then there's like some traditional stuff, folks. Like they'll use it on leather products and stuff like that for conditioning. Um, we're always experimenting with it. We haven't in a while,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah, I have to. You
there's a
mentioned
lot.
having gumbo and making a roux, and I'm curious how many people in Montana knew what you were talking about when you made that.
Not many, dude. Not many, man. And like where I grew up, like a roux for us is different for somebody else. Like you go, like I've been to places in Louisiana where their gumbo's like soup. And this ain't for anybody listening, like this ain't nothing against anybody in Louisiana, but like to me that's not gumbo. Like that's soup with rice in it. And so you know, for us like gumbo, the roux should be a little thicker and
Mhm.
like and then of course, yeah, out here in Montana, like, they I mean they I'm probably gonna get shit for saying this too, but like they beer batter their fish out here, man. Like we use cornmeal down
Yep,
south. Like
yep.
we're not the
We're
same,
not the same.
And so we're
I
not the same,
when
dude.
I first moved to Colorado, and even still to this day, I do not go out to eat very much because just the culture of the
Yeah,
food here is so vastly different from anywhere in Texas and the South that it's
yeah,
like the food ain't good here. I don't
yeah,
care what anybody says, the food ain't good here. It's not.
yeah,
You got to make your own food.
yeah, yeah. Here, I mean, it's like it's Montana's not known for food. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot of beef. It's cattle country, right? And so people just eating steaks, which is awesome. Like I don't mind a steak. You know what I mean? But um, like in Washington, it was the culture surrounding food was different. Especially there's a lot of like immigrants in Washington, and
Hmm.
so huge Asian culture, like huge Indian culture, and so it's just different. But for us, we try to we try to be as creative with bear and wild game in
Yeah.
general as we
Yeah.
can, because we don't go out to eat a bunch. We don't buy store-bought meat very often. Like we buy chicken on occasion.
Mhm.
Like my wife is like, dude, I can't stand this anymore. Like I need like white meat. You know what I mean? And I'm
Okay, sure.
like, and yeah, and but like in general, like we try to just be as creative as possible with our wild game. But for bears in particular, man, like you made a point earlier, right? That a lot of people don't even know that like you can like eat bear.
Yeah.
You can take that further that a lot of hunters either don't know that you can eat bear, or there's like this stigma
Mhm.
that bear tastes
And it tastes
terrible.
bad, or that
And
like you have to cook it all the way through to eat it or whatever. And yeah, I've
right,
heard that a lot
right,
too.
right. Yeah, and it can be both of those things can be true, but it's not like, it comes down to just like any other animal, it comes down to, your field dressing, and your processing and then how you cook it, and I don't know that this dude, I mean, if he can't cook for shit, I mean, like that sucks, you know
Or
what I
maybe it
mean?
tastes
But it's like,
bad.
you know, right, but yeah, it's like, well, maybe you should have somebody else cook it for you, I guess, or I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to be an asshole, but I'm just
Yeah,
saying, like,
yeah.
there's so many circumstances surrounding it that, like, you can't ever really, like, pinpoint.
Yeah, and I think that's the same
But,
with any venison, right? And I have a funny story. I was in Africa in April, and
yeah,
there
yeah.
was another couple there. Well, it was a dad and his son were hunting, but both of their wives were there. And the dad and
Hmm.
his wife, so the mom, um, we get to camp. You have a chef at camp who's like cooking the wild game meat that you get, that kind of everyone gets each day. And she makes it a point on the first day. She's like, I don't eat venison. And her husband had hunted all her, like, ever since they had been together. They had been together for probably like 20 plus years. But when he would cook it, he cooked it for himself, and he never cooked it for her because she didn't like the smell of it when he was processing it, all this kind of
Yeah,
stuff. But nonetheless, despite her not liking venison, like the chef would make meals for everyone that had the different venison meat in it from the different animals, and then would make her something on her own that was just beef or chicken or whatever. And it never failed that at
yeah,
every meal she still wanted to taste whatever it was that was on her husband's plate, because she was just curious. Oh, I've never had oryx before, I've never had kudu before, even though it's venison. Like, she was curious.
right.
And every single thing that she tried, she was like, oh, this is so good, I love this, like, why don't I like venison at home? And I'm like, maybe your
Yeah,
husband just can't
yeah.
cook. Like, it's a thing.
I mean, yeah, like, and it's even down to, speaking of venison, like in the South, it's pretty common, like especially in Florida, where it is just like hot as hell, like for 90% of the year. Um, like I grew up in, like, you would put deer like in coolers with ice water, like literally like put the meat in contact with the ice water, and it would like I eat that now, and I'm like, ugh, like this is not good. Like, you know what I mean? But like, I wasn't until I was out west that I really knew the difference. Because out here it's cold enough in deer season, like you can hang them outside if you want to. You know, um, and so, but it really does come down to, the quality of like the field dressing and the prep and those things. But one thing that I'm really big on, and this is something that Joe from the American Bear Foundation and I talk about a lot, is that, for hunters, like the value in deer and elk and anything else they hunt is the food, right? And so you have some hunters that think, even hunters, that like don't bear hunt because they think it's nasty, or like, um or whatever, right? And so, um they won't do it. But the value for hunters and what they shoot for, 99.5% of all the hunters out there, the value's in the food. And I think that if people knew more about just how delicious bear is,
Hmm.
like, 'cause it is insanely good. It's not like any other wild game, because of the fat content, because of how how bold and flavored it is because of how it can be sweet, in the fall or
Mm.
whatever. Like if folks had any clue how good bear meat is, I think they would place a lot more value on them as an animal, you know. And so from a conservation standpoint, I think that education surrounding eating bears is extremely important, and which is it's why I've dedicated like so much of my time and efforts and like my social media posts and stuff like that to it is to try to turn people onto it, I guess. Dude, anytime anybody comes over, I always cook bear for them. And I'm like, and then I send them on the way. I'm like, all right, now go shoot one, like,
Yeah. Go
but
shoot. Yeah.
so but it's hard. They're never going to be as valued as elk, right? And elk are awesome, dude. Like I shot my first one last year, and I was just like, dude, elk are awesome. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, um, so it's an uphill battle for sure. And then there's states like Wyoming where you don't even have to take the bear meat out after you shoot one, which is,
Mm.
uh,
Mm. I didn't
yeah,
know that.
that's something I've been working. And so we've kind of, between me and Joe and some other folks, we kind of like launched this uh, campaign, so to speak, of trying to get more content and education out there about eating bears,
Mhm.
so that like folks, whenever it comes time to vote on something like that, folks might be like, you know what, maybe like you should have to take the
Mm.
meat out. You know what I mean? Because you have to for every other critter except for like
Right.
coyotes,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I didn't know that
or
about
wolves.
Wyoming. That's interesting. And I think what I've heard a lot too
Hmm.
is, and this is coming from other hunters, like, oh, I'm not a predator hunter. I don't care to hunt predators.
Yeah,
or they'll kind of say, kind of alluding to what we were talking about, like they think you can't eat the meat or they think it tastes bad. They're like, I only hunt for meat. Like, well, that doesn't mean that you can't get meat from a bear or anything like that. So why
right,
does that count that out?
right. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a lack of
Hmm.
education, and I think that if people just like really focus more on even just, well, maybe that's the wrong way to say it. I think if people were just more willing to pay
Yeah.
attention, and even just hear out somebody's point about hunting bears or even try it, you know what I mean? But again, it's like, just like the weight of most people's hearts is food, right? I mean, it's the weight of my heart. And so, like you put like this delicious bear, whatever that you cooked in front of somebody and they eat it, then the whole idea is that like, they might be like, man, like maybe I should go shoot one, you know. And that said, it is becoming more popular too. A lot of people curious about it, I mean, we're in the day and age of social media, right? And so, during spring bear season, you start seeing all these spring bears going down, not from me, of course, but from everybody else, you know, uh, it might make that hunter who doesn't hunt predators or who does think that bear meat's nasty. They might be like, you know what, man, maybe there's something to it, you know.
I think
So,
for me, if nothing else,
uh,
it's like when I got into hunting, my thought was always like, I want to fill my freezer, and like one deer a year is not gonna fill my
hmm,
freezer to where I don't have to go to the store anymore. Like two deer a year is
yeah,
not gonna fill my freezer to where I have to go to the store anymore. Like if I want
right,
to have my freezer full of meat that I've harvested year round, you have to be out. Now, maybe if you're one single person with an elk, like that's probably enough to feed one single person for a year. But like if you have a family, one elk is
yeah,
probably not going to feed your family for a full year, maybe for 6 to 8 months, but definitely
no,
not a year. So my thought has always been like, get out every opportunity that you have, whether it's spring bear, whether it's spring turkey. I know turkey isn't a lot of meat, but in a lot of states you can take more than one. Or you can hunt turkey
right,
in pretty much every single state. So if you have the flexibility to be able to travel, you can kill one in Colorado, one in like every bordering state without having to go very
exactly,
far. Then fall time comes around, get out. Like I get a lot of flack because I post a lot about archery on my page, but I'm not just a bow hunter. Like, I
Hmm.
will harvest an animal with
Right.
whatever method I can to fill my freezer, and I don't have really one
Yeah.
preferred
Yeah.
method. And so a lot of people be like, "Oh, you killed that with a rifle? Like, that's cheating." I'm like, "No, I'm a hunter at the end of the day, and I like to get food in my
Exactly.
freezer."
Exactly.
So yeah, to the point of like getting out for bears, I think a lot of people also think that like, oh, hunting season's just in the fall. And if they don't have bears where they live,
Yeah.
or like if they're just focused on deer or elk, then like why would they put any effort into bear? Where to me, it's just more opportunity to get out. It's like you said, you were hunting bear for 2, 3 months, and you didn't
Yeah.
put one down, unfortunately. But like, how much fun is it to be in the woods
Yeah.
chasing a critter for that long? Like that is so much fun.
Right. Exactly. And like, and man, I cannot tell you how much I learned out there just in general. I mean, just about like where the deer and the elk are, about where water sources are, that might still be there in the fall that animals might, they might gather to. I mean, there's so much more to learn out there than just the bears, I mean, it's like it's all an ecosystem, right? You're learning what plants are growing at certain times of year, what's coming in, what's coming out. You can learn how rain, versus super arid, dry heat affects things, grasses and whatnot, snow burn, things like that. So there's a lot of value in just being out there. I mean, and plus, like, dude, like being out there is awesome. Like, why wouldn't you want to be out there? Like it's, but people are busy and everybody's situation is different.
Sure.
But I think that just being out there is half the battle for anybody who doesn't know how to hunt bears. I mean, shit, like I didn't know how to hunt bears until I did, and even then, every single season I learn more, and this one especially. And I'm not gonna I'm not gonna say that I wanted to be out there for 2 months,
Right.
but that's the way that the season played out, right? And I was thankful to be out there all the same, like thankful that I have the physical ability to be out there and thankful to have the time and the opportunity to be out there and to, especially for me, be in a state where there is that opportunity to be out there and for all the public land that we have here in Montana, which is not going to be sold off unlike some other states. And
Why are
so
you guys not on the list?
um
That's not fair.
it's uh kind of ugly the way that that came about, man. I think that one of our senators, Steve Daines, made a backdoor deal, which is kind of not kind of. It's pretty messed up. Like great for us, but really not in the best interest of the long term, right?
Yeah.
And so like Zinke and Daines and some other folks, they were kind of at the forefront of last time when Mike Lee tried to bring all of this, like, we're going to sell off all the public land deal. And it was a lot less land. Everybody was up in arms about it, but our Montana representatives kind of like led the charge, and they were basically like, "We're not going to have anything to do with this bill if it's in there." And then the next version of the bill comes around, and Montana's left off of it, right? And so it makes you wonder.
What's
But
going on that you don't know about? Yeah,
yeah,
that's fair.
exactly. But but politics aside, like it's uh it's a great opportunity to get out there, right? And it's and I'm a learner. Like I like learning stuff. I like learning about stuff that doesn't even matter to me. And so whenever I learn about things that actually have something to do with my daily
Yeah.
life or who I am as a person, like it definitely is a big motivator
Nice. Yeah.
to be
Yeah,
out there.
I think any opportunity, and Kenny talks about the same thing, is like just being out there. Like if you just
Yeah,
go take a backpacking trip and you don't have a single weapon in your hand, like be out there and just watch and observe like what the
yeah,
critters are doing, and you'll learn so much as a hunter just being out there and observing. And
right.
that's really the best way. I know a lot of people become a victim of like e-scouting and think that they can plan their whole trip
Yeah,
that way, which unfortunately, that's kind of what social media teaches you. So when I first moved out to Colorado, I was like,
Yeah,
oh, I can just e-scout my way into a good hunt, and quickly learned that like Onyx might tell me there's water there and there's not water there. Or like it might look
yeah,
like a good
exactly.
area on an online map, but it looks totally different in person. And so I agree that there's no better way to learn than to just get out there and just put your boots on the ground.
Yeah, yeah, I can certainly attest to that. We decided to start doing more backcountry hunts this year and packing in. And let me tell you how much e-scouting did for us, which was jack shit because we got in there and it was a nightmare.
Yep.
And I'm just like looking around at like where I'm standing. And I'm like, how the hell did I even get in here? And more importantly, how the hell are we going to get out of here? You know,
Yep.
and my wife is like cursing my name, and I'm just like, dude, like she's gonna divorce me like when I get off the mountain. And it's because I e-scouted, like, and so it's
I love
um,
you, Onyx, but screw
but
you.
there, yeah, I know, like I'm calling Onyx, but uh, that said though, like e-scouting did help a lot this season
Yeah.
as well. But it took like the boots on the ground for it to be
Mhm.
effective, and it took the boots on the ground to know what I was
Mhm.
looking for
Yep,
e-scouting,
that makes sense.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, and with bears, like they can live in just so much different stuff, man. I mean, you can find them down low in the creek bottoms and it's thicker than shit, and you can't see anything. They live way up high in like these big, beautiful basins that like it looks like the angels would just come down from heaven above, and like
Yeah.
it's like, and then they can live in like these rocky cliffs that like you're like, dude, that you should be a mountain goat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's nuts. They're the craziest critter out there for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You
Well,
know?
sweet, we're coming up on about
Yeah.
an hour here, even though my recording says about 2 hours because we spent an hour figuring this thing out.
Yeah.
I end
Yeah.
all of my conversations asking my guests, what does wild strength mean to you, or what comes to your mind when you think of wild strength? So, Brett, what does wild strength mean to you?
Oh man, damn, that's a deep question, dude.
It's become my favorite part of the podcast. It was so
uh,
unintentional. It was just like, ah, we're gonna do this for fun, and then I look forward to it every time.
yeah, golly, dude, I'm gonna get gray hairs trying to come up with something that sounds epic.
Go for it.
Um, uh, what does wild strength mean to me? And, to me, wild strength, I think to me it mostly, I think it would represent how much you can truly push yourself when you're out there, but also through like that struggle and pushing through like those difficult, like those pack in hunts that we did that were a nightmare, right? I think that it also represents like, how strong of a connection you can have with the environment that you're hunting.
Mm.
If you were more strongly connected with the wild that you were in, you're going to be a more successful
Mhm.
hunter, you know?
Mhm.
Um, a good example of that is I was talking with Joe from the ABF, and he was telling me about how, like these dudes, will ask him for advice, and they'll be like, well, man, I went to this spot 3 times and I couldn't find any bears. And Joe would just kind of chuckle. He'd be like, dude, I went to that spot 3 times before the season even started just to see what the snow levels were. Like, again, like we are not the same, And so it's like, I think that truly connecting with, whether it's the animal that you're hunting, and it's like hunting is a spiritual thing for a lot of
Mhm.
people, right? And it brings them closer to God, or, like some people say, like the wilderness is their church, or whatever it may be, right? So I think that you can not only like have that stronger connection with your wild, whatever your wild may
Mhm.
be, but I also think that you know, learning how to be a part of the mountain in some way, shape, or form just makes you a stronger
Mhm.
person. too. I mean, like, dude, like if you've ever packed out, an elk and had 150 pounds on your back, like I did with Kenny, who I love Kenneth to death, but he is a psycho, man. He is a psycho, dude. Like,
Yeah, I
God,
would
and
agree.
yeah, he he's like, oh, we can get this bull out in one trip, and I'm like,
You're like,
really?
brother, what?
I'm like, who's we?
Where's the third
but
and fourth?
after doing that, yeah, exactly. Um, I'm like, uh, God, what a day, man. But I think that going through those struggles, man, like it truly made me a stronger person. Like it made me a stronger person physically. Well, I mean, maybe the next day I felt pretty broke down, you know what I mean? But it drove me to want to be stronger physically as a person, but also like a lot of it's
Mhm.
here too. And I think that a lot of people like forget that part.
Yeah. No, I
So
love that, and I agree entirely. I generally get like common or about the same answer, just in different wording. But I really like the
yeah,
one thing that you said that I feel like I haven't heard, is like connecting, like the strength connecting to the wild, right? Like making the connection between the two with like
yeah,
what being in the wild means to you, what being in the mountain means to you. And like you said, it really
right,
takes a lot of like, I think you become, and I agree, you become stronger as a human, as an individual, as a partner, as a coworker, whatever, spending time in the wild,
right,
getting to know yourself at that depth and at those levels that a lot of people aren't really willing to go
right.
to. So I agree with that 100%.
No, no, they're not. I mean, strength. What is strength? It's being strong, right? I mean, having a strong connection with that wild. Like there is literally strength
Mhm.
in that.
Yeah, I
So
think
at
that's
least I
awesome.
think so.
Brett, if
But
people have questions for you, if they want to find you, if they want to reach out, where, go ahead, plug your socials, if they can find you anywhere.
yeah, Instagram is usually a pretty good way to reach me. It's at Brett Benton underscore. Um, I know we didn't talk about it on this podcast, but our nonprofit for men's mental health is uh, at the Campfire Fund. Um, Montana Knife Company is where I work. If you ever have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to, right? Or just in general, like I think that helping people is the best way to I think it's the best thing for hunter recruitment, which we desperately need nowadays. And so I'm always willing to answer any questions that I can, short of dropping you a pin to where to go shoot a bear. So,
Nice. I love that. Thank you so much.